Welcome to Bold TV. Unfortunately, Clay is out this week, but we have the wonderful Rob Smith back with us here today.
Welcome,
I'm here.
Rob. Thank you so much for having
you.
me.
Friend of the show. We've had you hosting before.
Absolutely.
And you're back from vacation, so we're glad to have you here on set with us.
I've been everywhere. I've had a news break, but now I'm back into it. I'm ready to go.
Well, let's get right into it. To start with, with the tragic shooting that just happened in Florida, I wanted to put up a tweet. This was, yesterday was my birthday, and my birthday wish was to help the loved ones of the Stoneman shooting in Florida. So I would encourage each of you, if you have the resources, if you have it in your heart, we're also going to put that link. So you can go to my Twitter there, at Carrie Sheffield. You can get the link. We're also going to pin that tweet. Or the link on the Facebook page as well. So make sure to check out that link, go to the Twitter page, and you can get the link to the fundraising page. So hope that you might be able to consider helping them out. So we are going to be talking more about the shooting later in the show. We've got a lot of topics. You don't want to miss it. We appreciate you being here. We want to make sure we integrate all your comments and your thoughts into the show. Make sure you're feeding them to our guests. We've got a great lineup. We're talking about everything from President Trump's budget release to the film Black Panther.
Black Panther.
Yes, we got a trailer, which looks amazing. So just, join the conversation. We're glad to have you here. So.
How was my week? It was, so look, this shooting has shocked me to the core. I think it shocked all of us to the core, not only as Americans, but as citizens of the world. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And I've been thinking about how when these shootings happen, we kind of, we say these things about gun control and we say these things about mental health and it's on the cover of every newspaper and this is all we talk about, but then it dies off. And we kind of stop talking about it until the next time it happens. So I hope that this time we can talk about how can we avoid this ever happening again.
Right. What specific actions can we take? Like no more talk. I mean, that was President Trump ran on the phrase of all talk, no action.
Right.
Saying the swamp. That's what it was all about. So President Trump, we'll play some tape from him later saying that he wants to take direct action, and I think we're all hoping for that. Breaking news I do want to turn to overnight out in Utah, which is my home state. Mitt Romney declared this morning that he's running for Senate. And he's throwing his hat in the ring. He's got his video there on his Twitter page there. I think he did it. He did this in a very sensitive way. We've got his string of his previous tweets because he was actually supposed to declare yesterday. But what he ended up doing, in response to the tragic shooting that happened on Valentine's Day, he said, "As a father and grandfather, my heart aches for the victims of today's tragic events. My prayers go out to all of the families and loved ones affected by this senseless act of violence. I will, out of respect for the families and out of respect for the victims and their families, I will not be making an announcement tomorrow about the Senate race." So he waited for a day before making that declaration.
It's very respectful.
Yeah, I think, in full disclosure, my cousins are going to be performing for Mitt Romney's fundraising prowess out there in Utah, and a former boss of mine, who we've had him on the show, Edward Conard, was a partner at Bain Capital with Mitt Romney and a major donor for him.
Right.
So I'm all in the bag for Mitt.
We know you love Mitt.
I know. Can't get.
I will say, I think a little bit differently than you. First of all, I will say that the move to, that was a very classy tweet, and to suspend the announcement was a very classy move, and that was a move of a leader.
Yes.
I believe, absolutely. Now, as far as Mitt Romney running for Senate, so Mitt Romney is 70 years old. He's running for the seat vacated by Senator Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch is 83. Mitt Romney is a sprightly young 70. And I always want to ask, is there not anybody else but the same people who have run for president, been governor of Massachusetts? We seem to be playing musical chairs with candidates a lot. I would love to see who the competition's going to be for that seat.
Well, and I think that's therein lies the problem, as in, ain't nobody going to compete with Mitt. Sorry. I mean, there are a lot of people who said that they would have considered, but they were bowing out because of that.
But
and so here's my question for you, though.
Okay.
When you say musical chairs, what about experience? Because that was some people were saying, well, President Trump, candidate Trump at the time had no experience. So which one is it, Rob?
Well, I think that when we look at the presidency right now, we're seeing what happens when you have somebody with no experience. But I think that there's something to be said for a fresh take on, the problems that are facing America. And I also think that there's something to be said. We kind of bantered back and forth a little bit. I said Mitt Romney's a billionaire. You said, oh, it's only a couple $100 $500 million. I said, you know,
Big
tomato,
difference.
tomato. There's a difference in the way you see the world as somebody that is not as ensconced in wealth as Mitt Romney is. And I would be so interested to see more people. We've seen all of these stories about more female candidates running for office because of the Trump thing and the Women's March and all that stuff. I just want to see different faces in politics. But then again, I don't live in Utah, and
Sure.
I'm not voting. It's a
Well,
beautiful state. I visited. It's wonderful. I don't live there.
It is a beautiful state, and in the future, I'd love to see a Senator Mia Love. I would totally be open to that. But for right now, I'm all in the bag for Senator Mitt Romney. Although, and I will say, to your point on being in a bubble of privilege, Mitt Romney, as a Mormon bishop, was serving very vulnerable families in Boston, in the Boston area. And that's something I think that sets him apart from a lot of people who, maybe aren't necessarily going to take these many, many hours that are spent by Mormon lay people to help serve people. I will say, though, however, this, to segue to our next topic, unfortunately, it's sort of a mixed bag because, yes, by being a lay leader he was a bishop, and I believe he was a bishop and a stake president, so he was a lay leader in the Mormon Church. This is good because it helps make sure that everyone is helping each other. I was raised Mormon, being from there. But it also, on the flip side, sadly, sometimes ends up being a place where people who are not experts when it comes to law enforcement or psychological care or domestic abuse situations, sometimes it can result in non-professionals not knowing how to deal with these situations. And I was on CNN on Sunday talking about this, and I think we've got the clip of that. We can talk about this a little bit because I think it's been underreported.
And that was more about the Rob Porter situation.
Right. Well, and CNN, and real quick, we'll put the CNN headline up because they did do some good reporting on this and basically saying, Rob Porter and Mormonism's Me Too moment. So Rob Porter obviously is, the senior ranking White House official who resigned in the wake of allegations about abusing two of his ex-wives. So I talked about this a little bit on CNN as it relates to the issue around lay leaders. Professionally, he had the gloss, he had the shine. There were many Republicans who saw the professional look. You've got Senator Mike Lee, Senator Rob Portman, D.C. Circuit Court Judge Tom Griffith, who was a spiritual mentor of mine at Brigham Young University. Rob Porter taught at Brigham Young University as well. So professionally, it's very clear that, all these professional successes for Rob Porter happened while he was reportedly abusing both his wives. So this was a problem that she had reported to their bishops at the time, both women. And unfortunately, the systemic problems of the Mormon Church are not equipped to deal with domestic abuse. The Mormon Church has a lay priesthood. They are, a dentist or an accountant or something else. They're not a psychotherapist. They're not they don't, in many cases, report this to, public officials. This is a huge problem that in the personal life of someone like Rob Porter, it needs to be managed more carefully. And unfortunately, the Mormon Church has been failing.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to see maybe if Mitt Romney, if he gets this office, maybe he can use that pulpit to enact some change here.
But I wonder, because Mitt Romney has always been, I could be wrong, he always seems a little reticent to talk about his Mormon background and the upbringing and all that.
Well, I think now that he will be, most likely a senator from Utah, he said in his announcement video that Utah is a better model for Washington than Washington is for Utah.
Interesting.
So in terms of the values, and you can go and check out his video, but he talks about Utah values and morals and ethics being something that he wants to export over to D.C. And in this case with Rob Porter, who was sort of an import-export between the two, this is an area for reform, and I'm going to keep talking about it. So
right. I would like to know, do you think that the Rob Porter thing is going to reflect negatively on Mitt Romney? Do you think that people will be asking him about this in the media and kind of derailing what he wants to do for Utah?
I don't think, well, first of all, I don't think a lot of people know this background about Rob Porter, so I hope that we'll be able to talk about it more. But the other thing is that the dynamic to watch will be between Senator Romney and President Trump to see what sort of back and forth there will be. So let's keep an eye out for that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so let's move on to our first segment with our guests. We're going to be talking about the school shooting, which took place in Parkland, Florida on Wednesday.
Yeah. Unfortunately, 17 young lives were lost during the shooting. Here to help us in our discussion are documentary filmmaker Alice Anil and National Review's Alexandra DeSanctis. Welcome, Alexandra and Alice.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So I think the first question that I have is, or actually, Carrie, you can start this off.
No, go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
How can we prevent another school tragedy like this happening?
Well, I think it's really important to look at the laws that we already have in place. You know, after a shooting like this, obviously we all agree something needs to be done, but I think we very quickly run from something to let's do literally anything. And I think we have to look at the fact that, for example, you know, while gun laws have loosened over the last 25 years, gun violence has decreased. So it's not necessarily the case that, you know, a loosening in gun laws always leads to more gun violence. What we have to look at are these spree killings, which have increased since Columbine, and those are the ones we need to focus on.
So, Alice, I have a question for
Alycé.
you. Oh, excuse me.
Sorry.
Alycé.
No worries.
You're actually
sorry.
saying it correctly because it technically does spell like Alice, even though I add an accent. It's
accent.
Portuguese.
Oh, Portuguese. Alycé.
There you go.
My apologies.
No worries.
So I want to ask you, because we talk a lot about the gun control debate every time we have one of these shootings. So I want to know, even before the gun control debate, do you think we could be doing a better job at identifying potential school shooters, people who have the potential to enact this kind of violence?
I think this is the perfect example of somebody that had all the warning signs, that was reported, that was apparently interviewed by the FBI, that declared publicly that I will be a professional school shooter, and had numerous people even report him. Yet at the same time, when he went to purchase a gun, there was nothing in his background. This is not about do we do more background checks, because there are background checks, and he was still able to get a gun. So I think it points to something similar to what you said. And I'm not even just coming from the left on this one. I'm coming more from a foreigner's perspective, right? I'm originally from Brazil. Guns are banned there. There's still a lot of gun deaths mostly because of the drug cartels, as well as, you know, the police. So that's where the gun deaths are concentrated, and the civilians that get caught in between stray bullets. But the Brazilian population doesn't want to arm itself, right? And most of the world, myself included, finds America's obsession with gun to be the strangest thing in the world.
Here's the thing. I think it's not strange. It's embedded into our very DNA. So the Second Amendment is one of the fundamental rights that we have as Americans, because we were the guerrillas who fought back against the most powerful empire known to human history, the British Empire. We were the little pipsqueaks, but because we were committed, you know that quote, never underestimate the ability of a few committed individuals to change the course of the world. That's what the American people were with their guns. You know, that was the miracle of the American founding. And so I think it's really embedded into who we are as a people. But I do agree that we need to make sure that guns are being held in the hands of citizens, people who are acting in the name of public service and not in the names of their insanity or their violence or their hatred. And in this case, I agree, Alycé, that the Wall Street Journal reported that police had been to this individual's home 30 or 40 times. I mean, my goodness, how was this person able to get it just blows the mind that this individual was able to do this.
Well, can I hop into another part of this conversation as well? Because we all talk about gun control, and we all agree that needs to be a part of it. But Alex, I want to ask you, there are a lot of people, and I was reading a couple conservative sites this week, and even beyond the Second Amendment, some people think that an increased police presence in schools is the way to go. And I can tell everybody on this panel that I volunteer for an organization called Live Out Loud. I give speeches to young LGBTQ youth. It gets better, all that stuff. So I did a high school in Park Slope, and there were I don't know if they were armed, but there were security guards at every entrance. I had to show them, I had to put my bag through a scanner. I had to do everything. So do you think that this could be an answer to preventing these shootings?
You know, I do. And I also think I've heard some people on the right, Second Amendment proponents, suggest arming teachers even. Obviously, there would be background checks involved in that. But I think these solutions are at least something we should talk about, because they get at the local level of the problem. They get at identifying particular individuals who might be a threat, rather than using kind of this very blunt tool of the federal government to try and stop these things that are, you know, can be identified. You talk about this Florida shooter. He was identified and yet not stopped by laws that are already in place. We need to figure out why the old policies aren't working and aren't being leveraged against these people. And if we can have better security measures on the ground, I think that would be a huge help.
Right. Well, I agree with you, Rob, because if you look at the Uber, the timeline of this guy got out of his Uber, and then literally 2 minutes later, he's opening fire in the school. And I looked at Wall Street Journal reporting in the mass shootings at schools since 1990, 71% have been by current or former students. So these are people who assess, they know exactly where the point of entry, where there is no barrier to entry. I mean, this ain't rocket science to say that, like, 7 out of 10 of these mass shootings at schools are from people who know how easy it is to slip through the system.
And how easy it is to maximize the carnage.
And that goes back to the AR-15, right? That's a debate we always have. That's the weapon of choice of usually mass shooters, and this is what always comes up. I mean, an AR-15 is easier to get than a shotgun in Florida. So are these what I call weapons of war, the people that are, Second Amendment aficionados, I'll just put it that way, believe that it's also the right of an American person to own what many would classify as a weapon of war.
Let's bring in a couple comments here. We got Pam Little. She says Florida has very lax gun laws. We've got Krishna Markanda says prayers from Paradise Island, Mauritius, Indian Ocean. Pam's comment, I wanted to play President Trump's response to this because he brings in the state element to this.
Our administration is working closely with local authorities to investigate the shooting and learn everything we can. We are committed to working with state and local leaders to help secure our schools and tackle the difficult issue of mental health.
And you notice that President Trump didn't say anything about guns, right? He talked about mental health. And we have another comment. Chris McDowell says, sorry, the government doesn't have the right to deny a gun. So where do we go from here? Because there are a lot of people that think like that. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but there are a lot of people that, like you said, have that Second Amendment right to bear arms. It's in their DNA.
But what you just brought up mental health, so I just want to put this one little point is that the Trump administration did repeal the Obama-era rule to make it harder for people with mental disabilities, which in their defense would only affect 75,000 people, but those are, the potential Nicholas Cruzes of the world, and they repealed.
That was opposed by the American Civil Liberties Union.
It was opposed because
it was
of
too broad.
No, right, and because it apparently impacted the rights of people with disability.
So
yes, but at the same time, this would, be one more measure to potentially, I don't know what the effects of it would be, to potentially decrease the possibility of people with mental health, which is what Donald Trump makes this about, not gun control, mental health, to get guns. But he repealed it.
Right.
I just want to point out, the Washington Post ran a piece fact-checking a Marco Rubio claim recently that found that there's no existing gun control proposal that would have stopped any of the mass shootings since Sandy Hook. And that's a huge deal. We need to look at that because we all agree, regardless of our view on the Second Amendment, that we want to stop these shootings. And if no existing proposal would have stopped any of these mass shootings, we need to look elsewhere at enforcing the laws we already have.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's, in terms of, like I said, the DNA of our culture. So the American founding, people had shotguns in their homes from the very beginning. So what's changed seems to be our culture, that we're normalizing this sort of behavior. These mass shootings weren't happening for the first 200 years of our founding when people had probably even greater access to firearms. So that's what seems to me is this, and we have a comment here talking about from Krishna Markanda says, would it not be an upbringing problem whereby the parents who should be blamed? In fact, any change in attitude from kids should have been noticed by the parents first. And in this case, he was an orphan who had been adopted. His mother had died last October, I believe. And again, having the police show up to his house 30 or 40 times over the course of his childhood, I don't understand the failure of the parents. His father died when he was young, but his mother, what happened that this mother and the neighbors knew at some point, the fabric of our American civil society, and this is something that Robert Putnam at Harvard has looked at, the decline in social capital. That's what I think in the first 200 years of our country prevented these sort of mass shootings from ever happening in the past. Because they had the same weapons before this became, so prevalent, more recently with Columbine.
And so many people had to fail on so many different levels in order for this to happen. But thank you so much, Alycé and Ali.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we are going to move on and talk about the highly anticipated Marvel film Black Panther.
It is here. It's here.
Yeah,
it's today. Welcome to Wakanda.
Let's play this the trailer here to get you guys in the mood.
Oh.
You're telling me that the king of a third world country runs around in a bulletproof catsuit? Why don't you ask him yourself? Because he's right outside. Bingo.
My king.
Stop it.
The Black Panther lives.
I'm here for all of that shirtless fighting. Also, by the way, I'll just put that in there.
Yes, we don't do objectification here at Bold, but to talk
Maybe
about
you don't.
we're going to talk about this with author Touré. He's also a podcaster, the host of the Touré Show podcast, and we also got brand ambassador with Jerusalem University, Chloe Valdary, and friend of the show. Welcome to you both, Touré and Chloe. First time on the show, Touré.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So first, tell us a little bit about your podcast first.
Yeah, I'm doing one-on-one interviews, hour-long, with like successful Black people who know things that we all should know. How did you become successful? Zadie Smith, Maxwell, Black Thought, Kendrick Lamar, and how do you do the thing that you do so well? So I want to know from Zadie Smith about writing, from Kendrick Lamar about emceeing. We're gonna have Joy Reid on the show and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and so I just want to talk to like really great people about what they're doing and sort of understand what they know that we don't know, so we can all get a little more for our rise.
Awesome. Ben Carson?
That could happen maybe someday in 20.
I love how Black people try to act like Ben Carson is like not successful. Like,
he's legendary.
It's very.
It's not that he's not successful, but is there a talent that he has that you would like to hear him unpack?
I want to know how somebody got from being poor to the level that he's at now. Like, I would love to hear about that.
Okay.
So, not that I'm a Ben Carson fan. How did this? First of all, like, how did this get here? First of all, we're talking about Black Panther.
Sorry.
Right?
Like,
We're talking about Black Panther. Now we're talking about Ben Carson. Turn to the soup, waiter.
So please return the soup.
All right.
So,
what are you doing with Black Panther on your podcast? Are you
I'm working. I'm trying to get with Ryan Coogler. I'm trying to get with some of the other folks. I mean, I met Dania, who is the general in this, and I mean, this film is not just a shot of pride around race, it is also around gender. There are a lot of really powerful, strong women. The lead military actor is a woman, and she is tough as hell. And I mean, it's just, I walked out of the theater like, so much pride, I mean, just this vision of Africa as this high-tech world power that's debating, should we protect all our resources for our people, or should we spare them with the diaspora?
All right, watch the spoilers.
There for this whole conversation.
Spoiler alert.
Chloe, so have you seen Black Panther yet?
I have not seen it
Okay,
yet.
so what do you, but we've all seen the trailers, and like
Yes.
you were, Touré was talking about the female warriors. Like, what do you think about that as a Black woman, all of that powerful Black woman representation?
I mean, it's beautiful. It's an incredible introduction to the beauty and glory of Africa. It's especially important to me because last year was the first time I went to Africa. And so, I mean, I went to South Africa, and I toured the country. And so this is a really important moment for African history, but also for America, because I think the first time we see this grand narrative told through the lens of Black people, but which is a narrative that everyone can actually see themselves in. And I think that that's the extra beauty of the film. But, obviously, as an African-American woman, I feel personally empowered, and I will be dressing up when I go to the movie.
What are you going to wear?
I don't know. We'll see. But I will be dressing up.
Well, it looks like, I mean, from the looks of you today, it doesn't take Black
this was
Panther,
on purpose.
This
was on
giving us a
purpose.
little
Yeah, this is a little taste of Wakanda.
We got a comment here from Victor Levy. He says Black Panther was awesome. I don't know if you got a sneak peek to the movie or if you're just talking about the comic book.
People were
Some
watching
people-
it at midnight.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it
even
came out at midnight. I thought it was later today.
right.
Oh, okay.
People were lined out the door
Nice.
at midnight watching it. It's a huge moment.
There's this no spoilers, but there's this little subtext that you'll note that runs throughout the movie a couple of times where Black people are basically like, "Shut up, white man," and it's like, it's just great.
Is the word white-splaining used at all in this movie?
The word white-splaining is not used.
Well,
Maybe
okay,
for Black
okay.
Panther,
I have
too.
to ask you on that though, because I wouldn't be excited by a white person telling a Black person to shut up.
But that would be entirely different.
Yeah, but I'm just saying in terms of being excited about it. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no comparison.
isn't that the
but there's no
opposite of the-
but there's no comparison, right? I mean, white people have had the dominant voice for the entirety of this country, and to see one movie where one group of African people are saying, "We run this country. This is our world. You don't get to speak here." This is our world. That is very exciting.
This is interesting because it's a bit of a paradox because Wakanda is so glorious in part because it is this idea of a country untouched by colonialism and untouched by slavery. And so on the one hand, I hear what you're saying, but on the other hand, there's actually, I feel like from the perspective of Wakandans, it wouldn't be, if I go into the fictional world, it wouldn't be sort of rooted in that same history that would make a black person telling a white person, you don't get to run this versus a white person telling a black person.
Because it could have been.
But
It
the
could have been.
diasporic message is
Right.
it's global.
Sure,
It's
but-
not
but-
just
but-
in
but-
America.
It doesn't have that same historical weight because, again, Wakanda is set in a reality that is untouched by slavery.
Right, but they understand that the diasporic
Yeah.
globe of black and brown people have been touched by slavery,
Right,
even
right,
if
right.
their particular country has not.
I understand. I think that the way it lands is probably, and again, I haven't seen the movie, but the way it lands is obviously important to us as the diaspora, but within the setting of the story itself is probably different from, because again, the history of Wakanda is not the same as the history of our reality.
And I think the reason that we're all talking about this and the reason that we're so excited is because we have just never seen this before. So we've never seen a movie like this where blackness and black people are centered. And I'll bring this back to we'll talk about Lady Bird, right? So I watched Lady Bird, which is a wonderful movie, and it's a wonderful coming of age movie. What is so profound about that is that you're seeing a coming of age narrative that's not about a white male. And I feel like you know, as a woman, you could probably understand that and recognize that importance as well. And I think that for African Americans, for black people, it's the same thing.
Sure. No, I mean, I kudos to Marvel for putting out this. I mean, 1966 is when it first came out, right? I mean, this has been, you know, in the public, and I'm glad to see the revival. I think it's awesome. I guess the point I was trying to make was that, I mean, that's what Dr. King was all about, was to say it's really shouldn't be about the color of your skin. It should really be about the content of your character. And in the case of Wakanda, you know, these are outsiders trying to tell them what to do. In that respect, if you're an outsider, I agree. You know, it's the question of a rebel, you know, trying to protect themselves. Like that, I would cheer for that, absolutely.
Absolutely. So I want to take it to this petition, right? The change.org petition where people are saying that it's a petition. People want Marvel Studios to donate 25% of the profits from Black Panther to black communities. And I don't know if they got any more specific than that, but I want to know what, please, if you know more, tell us, and tell us what do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's a little extra, to be honest.
I love you, Chloe. So unfiltered.
It's like
it's doing a lot.
It's like they were like, because this corporation with white people have succeeded from the black dollar, blah blah blah. Please invest back into the black community. And I thought it was a bit paradoxical because, as I understand from what I've read about this movie, it is in part a rebuttal to a view of race as a zero class or a zero sum game, and so this idea that because a corporation that has white people is succeeding, therefore black people are somehow not succeeding, I think is the faulty premise of the petition, and also they claim that it wasn't actually uplifting the black community, and I was like, how? Like the black cast, the black directing, like all these people are part of the community, and they're being incredibly successful and uplifted, and we see ourselves in this film and in this narrative, and it's an incredible moment in our history. So I didn't understand the argument.
And I totally agree with that. And one of the things you will notice too is that the film prizes dark skin, right? There are so many darker skinned
Much like
actors
Insecure
in
did.
this. Yes.
I noticed that.
And Hollywood and TV usually prizes lighter skinned actors.
Right. Well, and
when
that's
it comes to women, now light-skinned women, black women are always kind of like put up. And I've noticed as a dark-skinned chocolate black man, you know, the men have always been able to be chocolate, but the women are always light-skinned.
And
all that.
that's what Beyonce's father recently said, was specifically the women in particular, which I think is interesting.
Let's bring it
So-
back to Beyonce.
Always about Beyonce.
It always comes back to Beyonce. But
Did she make a cameo here?
No, but you know, at the Grammys,
she
she
does.
wore like Black Panther, she wore like a Black Panther purse or
and
whatever.
then she turned the Super Bowl performance into a tribute to
Exactly.
the Black Panthers.
Exactly.
which
Actual Black Panthers.
was
indeed.
wild.
That's a topic for another day. You'll have to come back for that one.
Please do.
Yeah, I want a movie about the Black Panthers.
That would be interesting. Who
Right.
would
There's a great
play? Who would
documentary on
play?
PBS.
Just start with Ryan Coogler and go
Okay,
from
yeah,
there.
yeah. I think Denzel would have to be in it.
Well, Michael B. Jordan. If Ryan
yes,
Coogler,
yes,
that's
true.
Well, Chloe and Touré, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
I gotta get out here and see Black Panther.
You do. Why haven't you seen it already?
I don't- because
you
I'm
hate black people? What's the matter with you?
Oh my God, I love Black people.
Just go back back from vacation.
I was on vacation and it's all sold out, and I can't movie pass it
here
because it's
you
all sold
go.
out.
Excuses. This is why we can't get anywhere as a people.
Oh my God, it's gonna make $200 million.
I'm kidding.
Love it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. That was fun. I'm excited to see it. So maybe we can go together.
Oh my God,
Because we're both going to be on the outs for the next 2 weeks since we didn't buy our tickets.
Yeah,
in
because we didn't
advance.
buy our tickets. Well, excited about Black Panther.
Yeah.
We're also very excited to welcome back our next guest. Joining us on Skype is California congressional candidate Antonio Sabàto Jr. Hello, Antonio.
Good morning. Good morning, you guys. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Great to have you back. We appreciate you coming back. I joked that I saw you were on The View, and since Clay Aiken does The View, I said, hey, Clay, we got Antonio before he went on The View. So
That's right.
We broke
you
it.
know a good thing when you see it. So, Antonio, now I know that when you were speaking at the Republican National Convention, you mentioned that one of the reasons you were supporting candidate Trump was because he would bring our country back, reforming our debt problem with $20 trillion in debt. So I want to get your take on the proposed budget from the White House that released that said we'd probably see an expansion of the deficit. Doesn't that bother you?
Well, we're going to have to start taking care of our country first right now. So, $20 trillion in debt, it's not going to be easy to cut down overnight. There's a process to do so. I think he's doing the right thing. The tax reform was leading in the right direction. So we're just going to go and see what happens between Congress and Senate. The only thing is right now, our president has both parties against him. Whatever he says, they're against. So right now he put it back into the Congress. So they have to do their job and fix this country. He can't do it by himself.
Now, I would like to ask you, because you bring up President Trump, do you feel like because you're running in California, all right? So do you think that you may alienate any potential moderates with this strong support for Donald Trump?
Well, the thing is, the media brings up Donald Trump to me. I don't bring it up. I'm talking about my issues in Ventura County. And when I'm asked about our president, I support our president. I don't want our president to fail. Why would anyone want our president to fail? And the media is always talking about this president is doing everything wrong. We have to start supporting our president at some point or another. But most importantly, I'm taking care of my county of Ventura County. I'm trying to help my farmers. I'm trying to help my teachers. I'm trying to help the police force and everybody in my community. So that's what I'm trying to do. But when I'm asked about the president, I do support the president. I do support the White House, because if the White House is successful, the country is successful.
And to you, what are the most pressing issues in Ventura County that you'd like to deal with?
Well, we're dealing with a lot of other issues on a daily basis, like just what happened in Florida. But right now, regulations is very important. We have to lower our regulations. We have to lower our taxes. We have to make it pro-business once again in California. We've lost a million workers and business owners in the last 10 years, and they don't come back to California. It's just too hard to open up shop anywhere in California, especially in Ventura County. So I'm trying to change that. We have to make it pro-business. Small business got to be able to flourish and get bigger and be able to help the community by doing so. So we have to change things around. The Democrats have pretty much, kind of let the state of California fall into the ocean, and I'm not going to let that happen in my county.
Okay, Antonio, so you are a legal immigrant. You've talked about that in the past. What do you think about DACA as it stands now, and what is your position on that?
My position on DACA is DACA has to end. It has to end at some point or another.
Completely.
Completely. It doesn't. This chain migration and open borders got to end. We've got to protect the American people, and the American people cannot pay for this. It's not a burden to take care of illegal immigrations.
So you don't support any path to citizenship for the millions of dreamers at all?
Well, listen, first of all, we have dreamers in America, and they're living on the streets. There's more homelessness in California than anywhere else in the country. We're number one right now in that department. Okay, so now let me ask you this. Once we help these dreamers, then what? Do we end DACA at that point? Can we have a wall on our border? Can we have a secure border after that? Can we get to, because they don't want to work with the Republicans. They're just so much against everything that the Republicans are trying to do. So let's help the dreamers. Let's go with that. And after that, do we end it? Is it over? Because, once you're in this country illegally, you're doing something illegal no matter where you're from. I came here legally. I waited in line. There's a lot of people that are struggling, waiting from all over the world, not just from South America, from all over the world that are waiting in line. They deserve their chance. But now we're trying to help people that are here illegally and taking advantage of the American people. That's got to end.
So
I'm not for
are you
that.
basically saying then that the DACA recipients, there might be a pathway, but they would just have to be treated the same as everyone else? That basically they would have to go to the back or the middle or wherever they happen to be based on how long they've
gotta
been
go
in the
back on the
country.
line. Yeah, they
and
gotta
not
go
that they
back
would
to
get
the
a
line.
preferential treatment because they were brought here by their parents. Is that what you're saying?
They were brought here by their parents. So do the parents stay here? Do the rest of the family stay here? Once you do something illegal, it doesn't matter what it is. We got to just understand something here. There's something legal and something illegal. If you do something illegal, you should be brought back to your country, no matter what. You're doing something against the law. But if you want to talk about DACA, let's end DACA at some point. So everybody who's been here, who grew up here, was born here, should stay here. Should follow a sort of, a process of some sort.
Like a path
Obviously.
to citizenship?
Path to citizenship eventually, but I think right now you probably want to be a human being and be not be shying away from who you are. I understand what's going on here, but after this, then what?
Well, now I'm curious because you said you don't support DACA at all, but now you literally just said that you support
right
kind
now
of a
we
path
can't
to
fight.
citizenship. So
Listen.
I'm curious as to which one it is.
I am telling you right now that DACA has to end. So, okay, let's stop right here. Today is the end of DACA, okay? So everybody who was here, who was born here, like you said, it wasn't their issue. They were brought here, and they were born in this country. And then after that, DACA has to end, and we have to build this wall. So let's find an agreement between two parties that is right for the American people, not for the DACA recipients, but for the American people.
Well, and Antonio, I want to ask you a question. We had on our show an actor, actually, he's part of the Black Panther. He came on and talked about how immigrants are being portrayed in the media. And he said that he wants to see Hollywood tell immigrant stories to help humanize them. And then you hear
Hold
a
on a
lot
second,
also
but
of the
I
crime
wanna-
that's happening caused by some immigrants. But, do you think there's room for Hollywood to be in this narrative to say, hey, let's humanize people? Do you think there's a place for Hollywood to do that?
Well, absolutely, there's a place for that, but I want to differentiate two things. There's immigrants and there's illegal immigrants. There's two different things. I'm an immigrant. I came here legally, done things the right way. We have laws on the books, and we should follow them. So anytime you do something illegal, I don't care what it is, you're doing something against the law. So we have to separate the two. I think Hollywood has got an opportunity here. I think they should take advantage of it. But we should talk about immigrants, legal immigrants who are coming here and waiting in line, not the illegal ones all the time.
Sure. Well, we got to wrap it. I got one last question for you. We had an op-ed by our Bold business anchor, David Grasso, in CNN. And the title is A Toxic Legacy for My Generation. So David is part of the millennial generation. And, we touched a little bit on looking at the debt issue. And you mentioned that you think that the president's hands are tied by Congress. But if you look at the actual proposal from the president himself, nothing to do with Congress, the proposal from the president himself would probably expand the deficit.
Well, I think it's actually up to the Congress. It's not true. Congress has to do their job, and the president said it many times. It's up to you, to Congress. Otherwise, I'm going to step in. At some point, he's going to have to step in and do something about it. But right now, it's in the hands of the Congress, and they have to do their job. There's a lot of people that do things for private interests and private donors, and that's not right. We got to start doing things. We got to start electing people who are there for the American people, like myself, who put America first, not the party first. So I think right now Congress has got an opportunity to do something about it, and I hope they do.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Antonio Sabàto Jr. Appreciate it. Thanks for waking up so early there in California.
Go to voteantonio.com and support my campaign, please. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
Great. Well, that was actually a good segue because, looking at fiscal policy, there is something that I've talked a lot about on the show, which is tax reform. And that's going to be our next topic.
Absolutely. So we're now joined by the executive producer of Stossel Productions and the creator of the taxplancalculator.com, Maxim Lott, as well as producer and writer at Salon, Alyona Minkovski. Welcome, Maxim and Alyona.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.
Absolutely.
So recent polling is basically showing support for the Republican overhaul of the tax code, yet Democrats are still on the defensive. So why do you think, Alyona, how many Democrats are being so angry about the success of the tax plan?
I think that the Democrats have a right to be angry about the tax plan because ultimately what the tax plan did was still very heavily favor corporations, wealthy Americans, those tax breaks that do apply to lower and middle income Americans are also tax breaks that get phased out in about 10 years. And that phasing out doesn't actually happen for wealthier Americans, for corporations. And so this tax bill does still kind of perpetuate the inequality that we see that's only growing in our society. As for people now feeling more favorably about it, I think that was to be expected. In the immediate term, if you get a tax cut and if you get a little more money in your pocket, of course you're going to be happy about that if you're an American. But the whole point of this is that it's not long lasting, right? This is not something that is policy that's going to keep helping middle class and lower income Americans.
Now, do you think we keep on seeing, all these bonuses that the big companies are kind of like putting out, in the immediate
Right. Well, and in
aftermath
fact, we actually got a
of
quote
this?
about this from the Treasury Secretary
great.
that we'll put up. Let's put that up so that our viewers can see exactly what the extent of the bonuses from the Treasury Secretary. So Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, put out a statement before Congress, and he said, since the law was enacted, over 350 companies have announced bonuses, wage increases, higher 401k matches, and new hiring, benefiting more than 4 million employees. We are seeing the fastest wage growth since 2009 at 2.9%. This is a meaningful difference in the lives of millions of American families. And Alyona, I agree with you that I'd love to see these permanent too. I'm actually very much with you. But my question for you, Maxim, is you put together your tax plan calculator. What's been the response? I mean, do you think the average American is understanding exactly what this tax plan means for them?
I don't think so yet. And I think the big takeaway here is the media kind of lied to people almost. They told people your taxes are going up mostly. The New York Times said the tax plan hurts the poor. New Yorker said more middle class pain. But then the reality is, according to the Brookings Institution, not conservative, 80% of Americans are getting tax cuts. Just 5% are getting tax increases. Taxplancalculator.com will tell you exactly where you stand on it.
I went to that last night, and I'm actually getting a break from this. But let me ask you, is that not just a short-term thing? Because I think what Alyona was talking about is the fact that, this is going to hurt middle-class and lower-class people in the long run.
So I don't think so, because the cuts technically expire in 2025 for all the rates, including the wealthy. But it's a political strategy. The Republicans tried this before, back in 2000, with the Bush tax cuts, and those expired in 2012. And Obama and a Democratic Senate extended them for the middle class because they knew, you never let middle class tax cuts expire, and they're not going to do that with these either. Even Bernie Sanders kind of said, "Hey, you can't let these expire," and Ted Cruz kind of said, "Okay, let's make them permanent." They're not going to let them
You're just
expire.
then, working under the assumption that down the line, maybe Republicans and Democrats will come together to keep those intact, but that's not something you can guarantee or promise to people.
It happened last.
It's not an assumption
And
I'd
you
like
also
to
have to
work
look
under.
at the limits, the caps on deductions that people have for state taxes, for mortgage interest rate deductions, which are now capped at $10,000. Those are things that made a really big difference in people's lives, and they are going to be seeing that.
Those are real, but the 80% statistic, 80% people are going to pay less. That includes those factors.
I want to ask Alyona, so do you feel like Democrats alienate a potential working class base of voters with comments like, the crumbs comment, right? Like, oh, this is nothing but crumbs for people. When I believe...
From Nancy Pelosi.
From Nancy Pelosi said that. And there was a very good op-ed piece by Errol Lewis in the New York Daily News where he said, these crumbs, if it's $60, $70, $80, $100 a year, these crumbs can help a lower middle class person get a year subscription to Costco, which would help save them money in the long run. Now, do you think that Democrats alienate a working class base when they say things like, especially the top Democrat, one of the top Democrats, Nancy
One of the
Pelosi?
wealthiest Democrats.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that, that was a mistake by Nancy Pelosi to use that language because, of course, that can easily be spun politically, and there are, the majority of people who make up our Congress are wealthy elites themselves, and so it's hypocritical for any Democrat or Republican to be using that kind of terminology as if, they're casting the first stone or calling the kettle black when it comes to, calling someone else elite. But the issue with the bonuses is I do think we have to speak honestly about how there is a little bit of gimmickry involved there, right? Because
It's the okey-doke.
out of the firms that have given bonuses, over half of them haven't actually raised wages. So those bonuses are a one-time thing, and that's an easy thing for companies to say, oh, look, this is tied to the tax plan. This is us being benevolent to our workers and giving out these bonuses. But again, that's not a permanent wage increase. Also, you look at companies like Home Depot, like Lowe's, like Walmart. They say they're giving a bonus of up to $1,000. That's only for the employees that have worked there for 20 years. And so the majority of people who are
give us 20 years of your life and we'll give you $1,000.
Where there's a very big turnover rate, most of them aren't getting that $1,000. And
the bonuses are small compared to the actual cuts in the rates, I think. And $1,000 one time is a lot less than $1,000 every year. But I think the media has really missed those real actual cuts for people. And by the way, they succeeded. They did a poll in December, and 50% of people thought their taxes were going up. Yeah. Only 14% down. Like, that couldn't be more wrong.
I don't want to derail the conversation, but are we going to get to the point where the media is not some big boogeyman that is always lying to me?
They are.
It just seems like that is the go-to boogeyman for everybody to say the media.
It's also just who do you mean when we say the media, though, right?
If anybody who watches Bold knows I talk a lot about media bias. And by that, I would interpret the phrase the media to be the 80 to 90% of self-identified progressive, democratic, and look at their donations to left-leaning candidates among people in the mainstream media. That's what I would describe as people who, and it's not to say that people can't look at something objectively. It's possible, but I know that people talk a lot about bias and whether it comes to whatever type of bias you're coming at from any different perspective. The reality is that if you're in the minority, you're going to be experiencing things different from in the majority. And I think that happens for a lot of conservatives in the media. I know
that's
for
fair.
myself.
Which is why everybody should be completely unbiased like me.
But the thing is, that's not realistic, right? And I think that when we have this conversation about bias in the media, listen, we're all human beings. We're all impacted by our own experiences. And so there is no such thing as approaching any kind of story without any type of bias, without some kind of subjectivity. And I think that we have to be realistic about that any kind of story, it has been framed by someone who comes at it with a particular point of view, who comes at it with a specific angle, by editors, by people higher up in the news organization, that they think, what is the story? You have to think of what's the angle, what are we trying to tell people?
That's absolutely true. But the problem comes in when 95% of donations from journalists go to Democrats.
Absolutely. But the thing about it is, and I have to say, Maxim, we're obviously coming from this from two different directions, but I like the tax plan calculator.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it really did. It helped me out. It just made things and we talked about this before I came here today. Now, I'm the working man. I'm the everyday man when it comes to this stuff. And it really helped me understand what was going on a little bit more. So I think that's
Maxim,
a really good tool.
I want to put you on the spot, Maxim, as someone coming from the right and looking at, the budget that President Trump just proposed, which even if you put in the most generous assumptions with the tax plan in terms of growth trajectory, isn't this a problem what he's proposing? I know, like Senator Rand Paul has said, it's great that we're conservative, but only when we're in the minority. So it's pretty meaningless now if we're going to propose budgets like this. Isn't this a problem?
Right. Trump's budget is not fiscally conservative. So that's just a fact. They're calling for increasing more spending, mostly on military and infrastructure. They have a bunch of other welfare cuts, but they don't make up for it. The one thing they do, they say, 8 years from now, we'll cut the budget. They'll gradually cut it each year, but it's like a smoker saying, next week I'll give it up.
No, I mean, that's a very good point, right? Because during the Obama years, it was nothing but freaking out about the debt ceiling, freaking out about the deficit. And now we see that all of that is a complete sham. But also, when you pair that with the tax cuts, you can't have it both ways. If you do care about running up a deficit, you can't increase government spending and at the same time enact huge tax cuts across the board that are going to put an extra, $1.5 trillion to the deficit just now. So I think that there is a lot of kind of political, the political facade is up for the Republicans in the way that
it makes sense for them because it's kind of the starve the beast approach, and Rand Paul kind of specifically endorses it. The tax cuts, maybe they add a little to the deficit, but that just means someday down the road you're going to have to cut spending.
Right, but again, as you pointed out, and I think correctly, what the president is trying to do here is add more money to the defense budget. We already spend over $700 billion a year on it. We don't need to do that. In the meantime, we're cutting hundreds of millions of dollars from the SNAP program, which are people who get $1.40 per person per meal extra when it comes to assistance. So, when you talk about crumbs, that's the stuff.
Well,
that
I think that is another topic, because the sign of success of a country is how many people you can get into work and not on welfare, in my opinion. But you have to come back and we'll talk about that, Alyona.
Okay, I'd love to talk about that.
Alyona Maxim, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So much. And next we've got a Skype guest, and she's got a very dramatic story. Daisha Hargrave is going to be joining us here on Skype. She's a middle school English teacher from Kaplan, Louisiana, who was arrested last month during a school board meeting. Let's watch that clip here while we get her queued up.
He was speaking to me directly.
And he respond to her?
That's exactly right.
But you run everything. He did.
The superintendent can't even look at her when she's talking.
Okay.
So, I'm pretty sad.
However you want to do it.
This is pretty sad. Our children.
My name is Angel Campbell.
Wait a minute, I asked for it. We'll bring them a comment and recognize Sarah.
Sir.
Just put her in handcuffs.
I apologize to the public.
He didn't know that.
Put her in handcuffs right now.
Let's go see this.
Yeah, this on video. What are you doing? What are you doing? Can you explain? Are you kidding?
Stop resisting.
I am not. You just pushed me to the floor. Sir, hold on. I am way smaller than you.
Wow.
And that's very disturbing to watch. Now, Daisha, for people who don't know, what were you voicing concern for at that school board meeting?
I was voicing concern for the fact that the superintendent was getting a $38,000 raise and teachers weren't getting anything. Students weren't getting anything. We've been promised more technology, better curriculum, and none of those things are happening. So it would just, like I said in the video, it was like a slap in the face to teachers and all the support staff, such as janitors, bus drivers, and everyone. We're not getting a dime, and he's getting $38,000 all in one shot.
And Daisha, I know that you demanded an apology for the way that you were treated, and you got a lot of response and a lot of empathy for what you were experiencing, to the point where the school board president resigned. Were you surprised when he resigned?
I was. I definitely was. Everyone in the community knows he's a very proud man, dare I say the word arrogant. And so for him to resign after this, it was shocking. I thought that he would definitely finish his term out. But he said in his resignation letter that he got what he wanted, which was the contract, the 3-year contract for the superintendent. So I guess he felt his job was done.
What has it been like for you since this video went viral and the story got so much attention?
My life changed completely. It's been overwhelming, a lot of anxiety, a lot of nerves about, what's going to happen, anxious about how this will all play out. What's it going to be like when all this dies down? Are they going to target me? Is it going to be a problem later? Just those types of things. We have a legislation in Louisiana called Act 1. Act 1 gives superintendents complete power, complete hiring and firing power over anyone in the district. So it's a really, that's why most people are scared to speak out and say anything, because of that new piece of legislation. So there's some fear in that, but it shouldn't let people be silenced.
So, Daisha, I'm curious, because I know that in a lot of school districts that the teachers' unions have a lot of power. For example, here in New York City, there is a book that came out called The Rubber Room, looking at how teachers who have been accused and sometimes, even convicted, that there are just a lot of protections that protect incompetent, bad apples when it comes to teachers. And it's because of the teachers' unions who are pushing for a lot of perks and a lot of benefits that, in my opinion, are just too much. They don't, that the taxpayers deserve to know where their money is going. Are you a member of the teachers' union? Was the teacher involved in this situation, or the union? And, is there a way to find a balance between the two? Because clearly what happened to you was just awful and wrong and just on so many levels should never have happened. But then on the other side, you see some teachers unions that, in my opinion, they are doing a lot of wrong things too.
Yeah, I can see that. In our state, Vermilion Parish is one of 4 parishes in the whole state that actually have a working contract with their school district so that we can negotiate and find common ground. So Louisiana is much different than New York City. Teachers don't have the power that it seems teachers there do have. We also don't make the same amount of money. We're not valued, point blank. The last few years, the profession has taken a major hit morally. It feels like the teacher's always wrong. We are evaluated twice a year. We have to meet certain tests. Our students have to perform at certain levels for us to continue to be getting any type of, to maintain our salaries. So we're like scraping by, hoping that students perform the way the district wants them to in order for us to survive. So it's a much different world here than it is there.
And final question for you, Daisha. How do you think that we can move to a place where we are valuing teachers more, but also we are educating our students more?
Well, the first thing that needs to happen is you need to treat teachers like professionals and they need to be respected. And I know it seems like in society that's just a common thing, but it's not. It's really not. We have legislators making laws for the classroom, and they've never even been in a classroom since they were a student. They don't understand how different a classroom environment is. It's very different to keep students' attentions. And we're doing this, like just for example, our district is doing it with a free curriculum you can find online. The kids have textbooks, have no resources.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Daisha Hargrave. Just want to let you know before we cut out that Cheyenne Reed says that this lady is a hero. So take that with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Good to have you. So last, we're going to move on to our Bookster segment. Viewers of Bold TV know that Bookster is our partner here as a website for book lovers and much, much more. And today we're going to bring author and The Economist Cuba correspondent with us, Roseann Lake. Her new book is called Leftover in China, The Women Shaping the World's Next Superpower. It addresses the gender imbalance in China that has led to a dramatic increase in unmarried women in professional society. Roseann, I just think you're, first of all, welcome to the show. And it's just so interesting that now you're a Cuba correspondent for The Economist, but before you were in China. So clearly you're a Renaissance woman.
Yes, I like countries where things happen really quickly and when there's lots of money and things are fast and they're very connected. And then I like countries where there isn't much money and everything's cash and everything's slow and there's lots of reggaeton.
Reggaeton? We'll do this after the show.
Yeah, after the show. So first of all, why the interest in Chinese culture in particular?
I grew up speaking a few Romance languages. I'm half Spanish, and I studied French and Italian in college, and they all kind of came easily. So I thought, I want to give myself a real linguistic challenge, and Chinese seemed like a pretty good option. So it was 2009, the Olympics had already happened, China was on the world stage, and I had just graduated from J school. And I thought, being a reporter in New York, fresh out of college, not so glamorous. Maybe heading over to China, where things are a bit more unexplored, I'll have more opportunities to report on things. So I went there, and I only intended to stay for 3 months, but I ended up being pretty smitten with the place and with the language and with the people, and I ended up learning Chinese and staying much longer and getting curious in a topic that turned into a book that came out this week.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about the book.
Right. So the book, as you said, is called Leftover in China, The Women Shaping the World's Next Superpower. And leftover in China refers to any woman over the age of 27 who's unmarried. And the word in Chinese is shengnu, and the prefix is the same as in shengcai, or leftover food. So it really is a very unpalatable term.
You find it sexist?
I mean, sexist is just the beginning.
Okay.
I find a lot of things wrong with the term.
I mean, the leftovers, yeesh.
Yes, it's not a very...
leftovers, honestly, have better flavor sometimes than in the restaurant.
This is how I feel.
Flavor a little time to
leftover paella, once those
yeah,
that
the
flavor
juices,
is
yeah,
eaten.
yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
No, well, I was surprised because the whole concept, China has relaxed to some degree the one-child policy, which my opinion is a really abuse of human rights and the ability to control your your own family. But and in terms of like just the gender imbalance, though, I thought I was surprised by the whole premise of your book because I went to Brigham Young University, and one of the professors there was an expert on the surplus of men that were resulted as the over decades, the one-child policy came to play because so many families valued male babies over female babies. And so the professor, Valdary Hudson is her name, she looked at what this would mean. So I was so surprised at the premise of your book, and I think that you are differentiating, though, between professional women versus maybe women who are not so driven by professional accomplishment. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm focusing on women who, many of them are only daughters, right? So they're kind of that very fine silver lining to that otherwise really gruesome cloud of the one-child policy, right? So in China, you have a lot of girls who were disposed of upon birth or even before they were born, as soon as ultrasound technology became more common shortly after the policy was enacted in 1979. And so what happens is, for the first time, you have generations of only daughters. You have a family where they go, well, we've got a girl. All right, we'll keep her. She doesn't have a brother, so we're going to have to raise her as our son. We're going to give her every resource, all of our support. If we have a family business, she's going to inherit it. And we're going to push her from an educational perspective to achieve and succeed as if she were our son. So these girls are raised as sons because they're kind of the first generations where this actually happens. But when they hit college, they graduate college, it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. China's still a pretty traditional society. And a lot of people think that, your fertility, the ideal age to have a child is 27. So we need to get you married so you can have one on time and so that you're still appealing on the marriage market in China. And that's where the term leftover comes from. But where it's misleading is that, China does have a surplus of men, but these men were born, most of these men were born in rural areas where parents wanted to have a son, right? And not as many girls were born in those areas. So these guys are in rural areas of China. They're not as educated. They don't have as much money. They're stuck on family farms because as sons, they owe that to their parents, right? They need to support them. And so geographically, educationally, economically, they're just not going to even cross paths with these women.
Well, what do you think people in America can learn from some of the social issues that you write about in this book?
Well, we could be grateful for a lot of things. One of them being that our parents are not usually as involved in our choice of partner as they are in China, right? So as I chronicle in a lot of the characters, a lot of the characters in the book, marriages aren't arranged in China, but there's a hand there that will try to orchestrate a partnership. And traditionally, it's in China, you believe in this idea of mengdang hudui, or matching doors and matching windows. So the ideal is to find a partner from a family that is similar to yours, right? And your parents have a heavy hand in that. And because in many cases you're that only child, who you marry and how comfortable your life is the nest egg of your parents. Because pensions in China, retirement plans, not so much. It's your kids who are going to support you in your older years. So it's kind of like you owe your parents for everything they've sacrificed for you in order to educate you and give you a good life. And most like, if they can afford it, buy you a house so that you can have one to move into with your spouse. But in exchange, you have to take care of them afterwards. And so parents are, there's a lot at stake in terms of who their kid marries, and they're very involved.
Wow.
That is absolutely fascinating.
I guess the moral of the story is if you don't want your parents meddling in your dating life, get them a 401k.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for being here with us, Roseann Lake, author of Leftover in China, The Women Shaping the World's Next Superpower.
And we should say Happy Chinese New Year.
Happy Chinese Day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Wow.
All right.
So did your parents help you choose your husband?
No. Okay. No, my parents were not involved in my choice of my husband. But yeah, that's so weird because I didn't realize that that's such a weight that I did not have on me. But we want to thank you all for joining us today on Facebook and Periscope. Don't forget to like our page Bold TV on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat.
And don't forget, if you like the episode, to make sure to share it with your friends because that's how the conversation keeps going. We have some really good comments that go back and forth.
Absolutely. And they keep on going, after even when the show's not live anymore.
Yeah.
And don't forget to stick around and join us for our second episode of Bold Life at 12 p.m. today. And also join us next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time for your weekly episode of Bold Business. And again, next Friday at 10 a.m. for Bold TV.
See you there. Have a great weekend.
Take care, guys.
Bye.